This is going to mess with y'all. I'm gonna end this podcast with this. All right. If Terence Crawford don't beat him the first fight, he doesn't beat him.
Those are the words of Showbizz the adult. Let me counterpunch. As you heard Showbizz make his counterpunch, his prediction on Terence Crawford versus Errol the Truth Spence. Now, if you guys don't know by now, you know my stance on Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence and who I think will win. And I'm a fan of both fighters. Very good fighters. Hope the fight happens. And I would have to agree with Showbizz. Why? Because of the age. Because of the timing. Okay? We've learned from Bob Arum, Don King, Oscar De La Hoya. We've learned in many situations where fighters fought people or fought other fighters that were possibly better earlier, but when they fought a particular fighter, they weren't. Okay? We look at Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford is 34 years of age. He'll be 35 this year. You look at Errol Spence, he's 32 years old. Okay, I think he's 33 now, I want to say. I know he's older than Canelo, and Canelo's 32, and Canelo will be 33, I think, next month. And I think his birthday is like in March. I could be wrong, right? Because I'm just going right off the dome. And if he doesn't beat Errol Spence the first go around, he won't beat him anyway. That's if he doesn't beat him, which I do believe he will. But I will go a step farther than Showbizz. If Terence Crawford doesn't fight Errol Spence this year, not next year, not the year after, there's a good possibility that he won't win. Why? Because Terence Crawford's peak has already peaked. Errol Spence is at his peak right now. But I think Errol Spence has more peak time because he's younger. Naturally. Okay, he is a younger guy. Terence Crawford has done a lot more in his career than Errol Spence ever has. And even though Errol Spence has been in the same weight class, he's took on some tough opposition. But he hasn't fought everyone, i.e. Thurman, Crawford, Ennis, you know, those guys. Who has he fought? He's fought Kelbrook. He's fought Porter. He's fought Garcia. Okay. He recently fought Ugas. You know, all good fighters. Okay. All top line PBC stock fighters. And I've noticed when people match up fighters, it's an art form by promoters. I've never been a fan of it, but promoters know, like Oscar De La Hoya has told us, you know, you hear Oscar, it's not the right time when the fighter's ready, that type of shit. Look at Canelo Golovkin. Canelo is going to stop Golovkin, bro. Watch what I tell you. That's just right off the dome. From me looking at that fight between Golovkin, Canelo, Canelo's going to stop him. Why? Because Golovkin's too old. Now, had Golovkin fought Canelo maybe in 2016, definitely in 15, he would have beat Canelo up. I mean, they had a great fight anyway, and it just proved how good Golovkin still was at his age. Okay, because he was still old enough, or should I say young enough, or fresh enough to make a good count of himself, let alone win the fight in a lot of eyes of people, including mine, the first fight. But using those two as an example on how that works, look at De La Hoya himself against Julio Cesar Chavez. Chavez would have wiped the floor with De La Hoya in 94. But he didn't fight him in 94. He fought him in 96, and I think he fought him again in 98. But by the time 96 rolled around, Julio Cesar Chavez wasn't the same type of fighter. In fact, Julio Cesar Chavez sparred De La Hoya and dropped him with a left hook because his punching power was just too massive. Okay? Now, people would say, well, De La Hoya wasn't ready, but how will we ever know? We definitely know Julio Cesar Chavez was ready. And then that's the problem. If you got two guys in two different primes at two different times, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get somebody either started too early or somebody either fought someone too late because they're out of their prime. Okay, so if Terence Crawford doesn't fight Errol Spence this year, there's a good chance he won't beat Errol Spence next year or definitely the year after. Yeah, it would be favored for Errol Spence, and the reason why is because of the age and everything else. Now, let me leave you guys with this. If all of a sudden, next year, like that fight doesn't happen, it collapses for whatever damn reason. If that fight, all of a sudden, that fight is wanting to be made so badly by Team Spence and Al Heyman's on board and Showtime's on board or PBC's on board and all this. If that fight is so pushed to the point where they want to get it done like ever before, you already know the waiting game was in effect. The waiting game, people. Okay? When you talk about the waiting game, that's how a lot of fighters get beat because they're just waited out. Terence Crawford may be a result of that. Hey, Terence Crawford's too good. Don't fight that bastard now. He stopped Sean Porter last year. Don't do it. Wait him out. Okay? But anyway, you guys tell me what you think of my counterpunch on Showbiz the Dope. Of course, please subscribe. And you guys been Counterpunch. Peace.